Section 5.5, half-angle formulas. We're going to use half-angle formulas to rewrite and evaluate trig functions. So there's the sine for theta divided by 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine theta divided by 2. Cosine of theta divided by 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine of theta divided by 2. And then for tangent, we have two of them, sine theta divided by 1 plus cosine theta, and 1 minus cosine theta divided by sine theta. For the cosine and sine half angles, you have to pay attention. There is a plus or minus in the front here for each of these. So to determine whether it's positive or negative, you need to know what angle or where the angle theta divided by 2 is located. And then that will tell you whether it's a positive or a negative. So let's go ahead and look at cosine of 22.5. So when we take a look at cosine of 22.5, how can we rewrite that? Well, this would be cosine of some angle divided by 2. Well, what angle divided by 2 is equal to 22.5 degrees? That would be theta, multiply both sides by 2, and theta would be 45 degrees. So we will rewrite this as cosine of 45 degrees divided by 2, and then we will use the half angle formula for cosine as plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine of 45 degrees divided by 2. We will then evaluate. Cosine of 45 is square root of 2 over 2, so we'll need to find a common denominator. So that would be 2 over 2 plus square root of 2 over 2. So you get 2 plus the square root of 2 over 2, and then that's divided by 2. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal 1/2. And then we will get 2 plus the square root of 2 underneath the radical all over 4. And so now we can simplify the square root on top. And so that'd be plus or minus 2 plus the square root of 2, and then divided by square root of 4 would be 2. So that's as far as we're going to go. We just need to indicate whether this is a positive or negative solution. And since cosine of 22.5 is in quadrant 1, so this angle is in quadrant 1, then it will be positive. So cosine of 22.5 degrees is equivalent to the square root of 2 plus the square root of 2 all over 2. Alright, let's take a look at another one. We'll do tangent of 7 pi over 8. So once again, we want to write this as tangent of some angle divided by 2, knowing that we want that angle to equal 7 pi over 8. So we'll multiply once again both sides by 2, and so theta will equal 7 pi over 4, which should be an angle that we are familiar with. So we'll rewrite this as tangent of 7 pi over 4 divided by 2. And so now we're going to use one of the tangent formulas. I'm going to go ahead and go with the second one here. So I'm going to do 1 minus cosine of 7 pi over 4 divided by, not divided by 2, sorry, divided by sine of 7 pi over 4. So we'll evaluate that. 1 minus cosine of 7 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4 is in quadrant 4. Cosine is positive on that one, so 1 minus square root of 2 over 2. And then sine of 7 pi over 4 would be negative square root of 2 over 2. So we'll find a common denominator. This 1 will change to 2 over 2, so that would be 2 minus the square root of 2 over 2 times the reciprocal of 2 over the square root of 2. The 2's cancel. We're left with 2 minus the square root of 2 over negative square root of 2. We can then multiply by the square root of 2 to rationalize the denominator. That'll leave us with 2 square roots of 2 minus 2 divided by negative 2, which then would simplify to 1 minus the square root of 2. So tangent of 7 pi over 8, exact value would be 1 minus the square root of 2. Alright, and the last thing we're going to look at is same thing we've done in the past, find the exact value of each trig function given information about a certain angle. So sine of alpha is negative 4/5 and is located in the third quadrant between pi and 3 pi over 2. So sine of alpha would be opposite over hypotenuse, and we could do Pythagorean theorem to find out the adjacent side would be negative 3. So now we know that cosine of alpha would be negative 3/5, and tangent of alpha would be 4/3. So now we're going to look at all three of our half angles. Sine of alpha divided by 2. So we will look at the first one here. This will be for part A. And this will be plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine of alpha divided by 2. So what's cosine of alpha? That's negative 3/5. So it'll be 1 minus negative 3/5 divided by 2. And now we're just going to simplify this to 1 plus 3/5. So that'd be 8/5 divided by 2, which is multiplied by 1/2. And that would be 4/5, so the square root of 4/5. And then we can break that up and get the square root of 4, which is 2, over the square root of 5. Rationalize the denominator, 2 square roots of 5 over 5. Now, the plus or minus, is it a positive or is it a negative? Now, since we don't actually know what the angle is, we just know where it's located in quadrant 3. What we're going to do is we're going to take what was given to us about alpha, and we're going to divide by 2, because that's the actual angle that we're finding. We're not finding alpha. We're not using that. We're doing the alpha divided by 2. So we're going to take the pi less than alpha less than 3 pi over 2, and we want to know what happens at half of that angle. So we're going to divide by 2, but we have to do it on all sides, and so that will give us pi over 2. So alpha is greater than pi over 2, and then less than divided by 2, that's multiplied by 1/2, 3 pi over 4. So where is that located? Well, pi over 2 is up here. 3 pi over 4 is over here. So what quadrant is that located in? Quadrant 2. So is sine positive or negative in quadrant 2? Sine would be positive. So therefore, sine of alpha divided by 2 would be a positive 2 square roots of 5 over 5. Alright, cosine of alpha divided by 2. So now we will look at the cosine formula for half angle. That'll be plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine of alpha divided by 2. So cosine of alpha is negative 3/5 again, but it's 1 plus negative 3/5 divided by 2. So 1 would be 5 over 5, which would be 2/5 times the reciprocal of 2, which would be 1/2. And that would be the square root of 1/5. So the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 5 can be simplified. 2 square roots of 5 over 5. Now, the plus or minus, is it positive or a negative? Well, once again, we're still in quadrant 2, based on what we did a little bit ago. So now we are doing cosine, which means it is negative. So cosine of alpha divided by 2 is the ratio negative square roots of 5 over 5. And the last one, tangent of alpha divided by 2. So we can use the third or fourth equation here. Whichever one we want to look at is fine. I'll go ahead and use the first tangent one. So this will be sine of alpha divided by 1 plus cosine of alpha. So sine of alpha is negative 4/5. So this would be negative 4/5 divided by 1 plus cosine of alpha would be negative 3/5. So negative 4/5 divided by 1 plus negative 3/5 would be 2/5. So when you multiply by the reciprocal, the 5's will cancel out. And then negative 4 divided by positive 2 is negative 2. So tangent of alpha divided by 2 is equal to negative 2. And it doesn't matter. You could have used the 1 minus cosine of theta over sine of theta, and it still would have been equivalent. So you still would have got a value of negative 2. And so that is it for half angles. Once again, we found exact values of angles that we're familiar with, but half of them, like 22.5 is half of 45. Same thing with 7 pi over 8 being half of the 7 pi over 4. And then we used the idea of a ratio and being able to find the other trig functions to find all three half angles for sine, cosine, and tangent. So now write your summary as to what those important pieces are from this section.